Have you ever noticed that some people seem to lose belly fat effortlessly while others do everything right? Eat healthy, count calories, exercise consistently, and still struggle with stubborn abdominal fat? What if the problem isn't what you're eating? What if the real issue is when you're eating? Because here's something most people don't realize. The body does not burn fat efficiently when insulin is constantly elevated. And in today's world, many people spend almost their entire day in a fed state. Breakfast at 7, a snack at 10, lunch at 1, coffee with sugar at 3, dinner at 7, dessert at 9. Your body never gets the signal that it's safe to switch from storing fat to burning fat. And that's especially important when we're talking about belly fat. Because belly fat isn't just sitting under the skin. A large portion of it is called visceral fat, the dangerous fat that surrounds your liver, pancreas, intestines, and other vital organs. This is the fat most strongly linked to insulin resistance, fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, chronic inflammation, and accelerated aging. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Every time you eat, insulin rises. Insulin's primary job is to move nutrients into cells. But insulin also acts like a storage hormone. When insulin is elevated, fat burning is significantly reduced. Now imagine your body as a hybrid car. When insulin is high, you're running primarily on incoming fuel from food. But when insulin drops during fasting, your body begins switching over to stored fuel, your own body fat. And this is where things get fascinating. Research over the last several years has shown that strategic fasting may improve metabolic flexibility, increase fat oxidation, improve insulin sensitivity, and help reduce visceral fat stores. Multiple recent studies have found improvements in body composition and metabolic health markers through time-restricted eating and intermittent fasting protocols. But there is also an important truth that often gets ignored. Fasting is not magic. It's not a miracle shortcut. And it's not simply about eating less. The biggest mistake people make is copying someone else's fasting schedule without understanding the underlying biology. They fast too aggressively, raise cortisol, lose muscle, destroy their energy levels, and then conclude that fasting doesn't work. The goal isn't to starve yourself. The goal is to create a metabolic environment where your body can finally access the stored fat it's been holding on to for years. And when done correctly, fasting becomes much more than a weight loss tool. It becomes a metabolic repair tool. It can help improve blood sugar regulation. It can reduce insulin exposure. It can support liver health. It may activate cellular cleanup processes known as autophagy. And perhaps most importantly, it teaches your body how to efficiently switch between burning glucose and burning fat. Today, I'm going to walk you through the fasting strategy that many people overlook, the one that often has a much bigger impact on belly fat than simply changing foods or counting calories. We'll break down exactly why it works, what the science shows, the biggest mistakes to avoid, and how to implement it safely and effectively in real life. Because once you understand the physiology, fat loss stops feeling random. It starts making sense. And when you understand the signals your body responds to, you can finally work with your metabolism instead of fighting against it. Before we get into the fasting strategy itself, we need to understand the real enemy we're trying to eliminate. Because most people think belly fat is simply extra weight. It isn't. Belly fat is biologically active tissue. In fact, visceral fat, the fat that accumulates deep inside the abdomen around your organs, behaves very differently from the fat you can pinch under your skin. And that's why two people can weigh exactly the same, wear the same clothing size, and yet have dramatically different health risks. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Imagine your abdominal cavity as a storage room. Subcutaneous fat is like boxes stacked neatly against the walls. They take up space, but they're relatively harmless. Visceral fat is different. It's like clutter packed around the electrical panel, the water heater, and the furnace. Now the critical systems can't function efficiently. Your liver becomes affected. Your pancreas becomes affected. Your hormone signaling becomes affected. And inflammation begins to rise throughout the body. Researchers have consistently found that visceral fat releases inflammatory compounds and hormones that contribute to insulin resistance, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, and type 2 diabetes. More recent studies continue to show that excess abdominal fat strongly predicts future metabolic disease risk, even when overall body weight appears normal. This is why some individuals are considered thin outside, fat inside. They may not appear overweight, but they carry excessive visceral fat around their organs. And here's the critical connection. Visceral fat and insulin resistance feed each other. The more visceral fat you accumulate, the more insulin resistant you become. The more insulin resistant you become, the easier it becomes to store additional visceral fat. It's a vicious cycle. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of insulin as a storage manager. When everything is functioning properly, insulin efficiently directs glucose into cells where it's used for energy. But when cells become resistant to insulin's message, it's like employees no longer responding to the manager's instructions. The manager starts shouting louder. In biological terms, your pancreas produces more insulin. Now, insulin levels remain elevated longer and more frequently. And elevated insulin creates a problem, because insulin is one of the strongest signals for fat storage. When insulin stays high, your body receives a clear message. Store energy, not burn stored fat. This explains why calorie counting alone often fails. A person can technically reduce calories while still spending most of the day in an insulin-dominant state. They're eating less, but their metabolism still struggles to access stored body fat. The body isn't simply responding to calories, it's responding to hormonal signals. And one of the most important signals is insulin. What the research shows is that lowering chronically elevated insulin levels often improves metabolic flexibility, the body's ability to switch between burning glucose and burning fat. This is where fasting starts becoming powerful. Not because fasting contains magic, not because fasting somehow violates the laws of thermodynamics, but because fasting creates periods when insulin can naturally decline. And when insulin declines, fat-burning mechanisms become much more accessible. This is one reason why many people notice reductions in waist circumference before seeing dramatic changes on the scale. Their bodies are beginning to access stored abdominal fat. The scale may move slowly, but their metabolism is changing. Their liver is improving. Their insulin sensitivity is improving. And their visceral fat burden is beginning to decrease. Now here's something even more interesting. Many people focus entirely on what they eat, while ignoring the fact that their body never receives a break from digestion. The average person starts eating shortly after waking and continues consuming calories until late evening. That means insulin may stay elevated for 14, 15, or even 16 hours every single day. And if insulin remains elevated, fat burning remains limited. This understanding completely changes how we approach belly fat. Instead of asking, what food burns belly fat? We start asking, what metabolic conditions allow my body to burn its own stored belly fat? That shift in thinking changes everything. Because the goal isn't to find a miracle food. The goal is to create a hormonal environment where your body can finally do what it was designed to do. And in the next section, we're going to uncover one of the biggest reasons modern lifestyles keep insulin elevated all day long, even among people who believe they're eating healthy. And once you see it, you'll understand why meal timing may be far more important than most people realize. If this is helping you understand your metabolism in a new way, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. Every week, we break down the science of fat loss, longevity, and metabolic health into practical strategies you can start using immediately. Most people assume that belly fat is caused by eating too much, but in many cases, the bigger problem is that the body never gets a chance to stop processing food. And this is where one of the most overlooked metabolic mistakes begins. Constant eating, not necessarily large meals, not necessarily unhealthy foods, just constant exposure to calories. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Every time you consume calories, especially carbohydrates and proteins, your body releases insulin. That's normal and healthy. The problem arises when insulin is being stimulated almost continuously throughout the day. Breakfast, snack, coffee with sweetener, protein bar, lunch, afternoon snack, dinner, evening dessert. What seems harmless from a calorie perspective may create a metabolic environment where insulin rarely returns to baseline. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine you're trying to empty a bathtub, but every few minutes someone turns the faucet back on. The water level never has a chance to fall. This is exactly what happens with insulin. Your body wants periods of feeding and periods of fasting. But modern eating patterns often eliminate the fasting period almost entirely. As a result, your metabolism spends most of the day focused on incoming fuel instead of stored fuel. And that matters because fat burning becomes significantly more active when insulin levels remain low for extended periods. This brings us to one of the most important concepts in metabolic health: metabolic flexibility. Metabolic flexibility is your body's ability to smoothly switch between burning glucose and burning fat. Healthy humans evolved to do this naturally. When food was available, we used incoming energy. When food wasn't available, we accessed stored energy. But many people today have become metabolically inflexible. Their bodies have become dependent on a steady stream of calories. Miss a meal and energy crashes. Skip breakfast and cravings appear. Go a few hours without eating and concentration drops. These symptoms are often signs that the body has lost efficiency in accessing stored fat. Research in recent years has shown that time-restricted eating can improve metabolic flexibility, insulin sensitivity, glucose control, and body composition in many individuals. Scientists are increasingly recognizing that meal timing influences metabolism independently of calorie intake alone. Now, here's where things become especially important for belly fat. Your liver sits at the center of this entire process. Think of the liver as your body's metabolic command center. The liver stores glycogen, regulates blood sugar, processes nutrients, manages fat metabolism, and helps determine when the body transitions into fat-burning mode. When you're constantly eating, liver glycogen stores remain relatively full. The body continues using available glucose. Fat burning stays relatively low, but as fasting progresses, liver glycogen gradually declines. At a certain point, the body begins increasing fat mobilization. Stored triglycerides are broken down. Fatty acids enter circulation. The liver starts producing ketones, and the metabolic shift begins. This is one reason why many people don't see dramatic fat loss results from simply skipping a single snack. The real benefits often occur when fasting lasts long enough for the body to move beyond the immediate post-meal state. And this leads directly to the fasting trick that changes everything. It's not necessarily longer fasting. It's smarter fasting. Because what the newest research and clinical experience continue to suggest is that when you align fasting with your circadian biology, your internal body clock, the effects can become significantly more powerful. In other words, timing matters. Not all fasting windows are created equal. A fasting schedule that works with your hormones may produce very different results than one that fights against them. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. Because the fasting strategy that appears to have the greatest impact on stubborn belly fat isn't simply about eating less. It's about eating at the right time and allowing your metabolism to work the way nature designed it. If you're finding value in this breakdown so far, consider subscribing. My goal is to help you understand the science behind fat loss so you can make decisions based on physiology instead of marketing. Now let's talk about the fasting strategy that surprises many people. Because when most people hear the term intermittent fasting, they immediately think about one thing: how long can I go without eating? But that's often the wrong question. The better question is, when should I eat? And this is where the fasting trick that may have a powerful effect on belly fat comes into focus. It's called early time restricted eating. Instead of delaying food until late afternoon and eating late into the evening, early time restricted eating concentrates meals earlier in the day and extends the overnight fasting period. In simple terms, you stop eating earlier. For example, you might eat your first meal around 8 a.m., your last meal around 4 p.m., or 5 p.m., then allow your body to fast overnight. At first glance, this sounds almost too simple, but the physiology behind it is fascinating. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your metabolism operates according to circadian rhythms. Virtually every organ in your body has an internal clock. Your liver has a clock. Your pancreas has a clock. Your fat cells have clocks. Even your gut microbiome follows daily rhythms. These biological clocks influence how efficiently you process food throughout the day. What the research shows is that insulin sensitivity tends to be highest earlier in the day and gradually declines as evening approaches. That means your body is often better equipped to handle nutrients during daylight hours than late at night. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your metabolism is like a factory. During the morning and early afternoon, the factory is fully staffed. Machines are running efficiently. Workers are alert. Supplies move smoothly through the system. Late at night, many workers have gone home. Operations slow down. Efficiency decreases. Now imagine delivering truckloads of supplies to that factory at midnight. Processing becomes more difficult. Something similar happens metabolically when large amounts of food are consumed late at night. Several controlled studies have found that eating earlier in the day may improve insulin sensitivity, blood sugar regulation, blood pressure, appetite control, and metabolic health markers compared with identical calories consumed later. This is a remarkable finding because it suggests that timing influences physiology independently of calorie intake. Two people can consume similar foods, similar calories, similar macronutrients, yet their bodies may respond differently depending on when those calories are consumed. And this has important implications for belly fat. Remember our discussion about insulin? The longer insulin remains elevated, the less access your body has to stored fat. When meals extend late into the evening, insulin exposure often extends as well. This shortens the overnight fasting window. Fat burning opportunities decrease, metabolic recovery becomes limited. But when eating ends earlier, something important happens. The overnight fasting period becomes longer without requiring extreme deprivation. Your body gains more uninterrupted time to lower insulin. Fat oxidation increases. The liver begins shifting energy production towards stored fuel, and visceral fat becomes more metabolically available. Now, does this mean everyone must stop eating at 4 p.m.? No. Real life matters. Family dinners matter. Social events matter. Long-term sustainability matters. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is creating a larger gap between your final meal and bedtime. For many people, even moving dinner 2 or 3 hours earlier can produce meaningful benefits. A practical starting protocol might look like this. Finish dinner at least 3 hours before sleep. Aim for a 12-hour overnight fasting window initially. Gradually progress toward 14 hours. Eventually, some people may comfortably reach 16 hours. But remember, the quality of the fasting window matters. Hydration matters, sleep matters, stress management matters, and nutrient quality matters. Fasting is not a license to eat highly processed foods during feeding periods. Think of fasting as creating the opportunity for metabolic healing. Nutrition determines what happens during that opportunity. One of the most exciting findings emerging from metabolic research is that combining nutrient-dense foods with properly timed fasting appears to create a synergistic effect. You're improving insulin sensitivity from multiple directions at the same time. You're lowering metabolic stress, reducing inflammatory signals, supporting liver function, and enhancing your body's ability to access stored abdominal fat. If this is helping you rethink the way you approach fat loss, consider subscribing. Every day, we explore science-backed strategies that help you work with your biology instead of against it. Because in the next section, we're going to examine what actually happens inside your liver during fasting and why this organ may be the missing link between stubborn belly fat and long-term metabolic health. When most people think about fat loss, they think about fat cells. But if you want to understand why fasting can be so effective for reducing belly fat, you need to understand one organ above all others: the liver. In many ways, the liver is the metabolic headquarters of the human body. It processes nutrients, regulates blood sugar, stores energy, produces cholesterol, helps manage hormones, detoxifies compounds, and plays a central role in determining whether your body is storing fat or burning it. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Every time you eat carbohydrates, some of that glucose is stored in the liver as glycogen. Think of glycogen as your body's short-term energy reserve. It's the fuel tank your body prefers to use first. As long as that fuel tank remains full, your body has little reason to access stored body fat. Why would it? There's already plenty of readily available fuel. But fasting changes the equation. As time passes without food, liver glycogen begins to decline. Your body starts looking for another source of energy. This is where the metabolic transition occurs. Stored fat begins to break down into fatty acids. The liver starts converting some of those fatty acids into molecules called ketones. And now your body is increasingly powered by stored energy rather than incoming calories. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your home has two fuel systems. The first is a small backup battery. The second is a massive energy reserve stored underground. Most people spend their entire lives running off the backup battery because they keep recharging it every few hours. They never tap into the larger reserve. Fasting allows the battery to drain enough that the body finally begins accessing the underground energy storage. That's your body fat. And this process becomes especially relevant for visceral fat. Because visceral fat is metabolically active and often responds favorably when insulin levels decline and fat oxidation increases. Now let's talk about a major modern health problem that directly involves the liver: non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Today, many experts consider fatty liver one of the most common metabolic disorders worldwide. What's alarming is that many people don't even know they have it. They may feel fine. Their blood work may appear mostly normal. Yet fat is quietly accumulating inside liver cells. Why does this matter? Because a fatty liver often becomes insulin resistant. And when the liver becomes insulin resistant, the entire metabolic system begins to malfunction. Blood sugar regulation worsens. Insulin levels rise. Fat storage increases. Weight loss becomes more difficult. And belly fat accumulation accelerates. This is why focusing only on calories can miss the bigger picture. The health of the liver often determines how efficiently the entire metabolic system functions. Research over the last decade has shown that fasting interventions and time-restricted eating may help reduce liver fat, improve insulin sensitivity, and improve markers of metabolic health in many individuals. In other words, fasting isn't simply helping you burn calories. It's helping restore metabolic communication. It's helping the liver regain flexibility. And when the liver functions better, the rest of the body often follows. But there's another fascinating process that occurs during fasting. It's called metabolic cleanup. You may have heard the term autophagy. Autophagy is often described as the body's recycling system. Damaged cellular components are identified, broken down, and repurposed. While many exaggerated claims exist online, scientists remain extremely interested in autophagy because of its potential role in healthy aging, cellular maintenance, and metabolic health. Think of it like a housekeeping crew entering a building after business hours. When the building is constantly busy, cleanup becomes difficult. But when activity slows down, maintenance can occur. Fasting may create conditions that support some of these natural repair mechanisms. Now, does this mean fasting is a cure-all? Absolutely not. The internet often turns fasting into a miracle solution. Real physiology is more nuanced. Fasting works best when combined with high-quality nutrition, movement, stress management, adequate protein intake, and restorative sleep. It's a tool, a powerful tool, but still a tool. And in the next section, we're going to discuss one of the biggest mistakes people make when they start fasting. Because done correctly, fasting can improve metabolic health. Done incorrectly, it can increase stress hormones, sabotage fat loss, and make the entire process much harder than it needs to be. If you've ever tried fasting and felt like it wasn't working for you, the next section may explain exactly why. Now we need to talk about the mistake that causes many people to give up on fasting entirely. Because fasting can be an incredibly effective metabolic tool. But it can also backfire when it's done without understanding the body's stress response. And this is where many people get into trouble. They hear about someone doing a 20-hour fast, or a 24-hour fast, or multiple day fasts, and they immediately assume, if some fasting is good, more must be better. But biology rarely works that way. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your body is constantly trying to balance energy availability and survival. When fasting is appropriate and manageable, the body adapts remarkably well. Insulin decreases, fat burning increases, metabolic flexibility improves, energy production shifts. But when fasting becomes excessive relative to your current health status, activity level, sleep quality, or stress burden, the body may interpret the situation differently. It may perceive increased physiological stress, and that can lead to elevated cortisol. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone. Now, cortisol itself is not bad. You need cortisol. It helps regulate blood pressure, supports energy production, maintains alertness, helps you wake up in the morning. The problem occurs when cortisol remains chronically elevated. Think of cortisol like a fire alarm. A fire alarm is useful during an emergency. But if it never stops ringing, eventually it becomes disruptive. The same thing can happen metabolically. When cortisol stays elevated, blood sugar regulation may become more difficult. Cravings may increase, sleep quality may worsen, recovery may suffer, and stubborn belly fat can become harder to lose. Why belly fat specifically? Because abdominal fat cells appear particularly responsive to stress-related hormonal signals. This is one reason chronic stress and abdominal obesity are so closely connected. You've probably seen this in real life. Someone is eating reasonably well. They're exercising, yet they're under constant stress. Poor sleep, work pressure, financial concerns, family responsibilities. And despite their efforts, belly fat remains incredibly resistant. The issue isn't a lack of discipline. The issue is that the hormonal environment is working against them. Now add aggressive fasting on top of that existing stress burden. For some individuals, that's like pouring fuel onto a fire. This is why context matters. What works beautifully for one person may be completely inappropriate for another. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine you're lifting weights in a gym. Thank you for spending this time with me today.